Hello everybody, thanks for joining this episode of Sam's Device Advice. Today I'm going to show you a new tool that came out from the company that brings us Read and Write for Google. The company's name is TextHelp, and they've recently added a dashboard that gives you a little bit more control over what your students are using, as well as being able to track how much they're using it as well. So thank you very much for joining. Tonight is Friday. It's actually Good Friday, so the Maple Leafs are playing Boston for Game 5. So I thought it was very important to represent the boys. If you are a Boston fan, I'm going to politely ask you to turn this video off. Okay, let's go ahead and look at my desktop. So here, they've recently added this website. It's not an additional app or anything from TextHelp. And I'll add a link in the description for you, but the website is datadesk.texthelp.com. So I'm going to bring this up for you. Now, to be honest, I don't actually have any actual students in this account, but I will have a screenshot to show you what it looks like with real actual usage. So the DataDesk from TextHelp is the idea to give you a little bit more control and a little more understanding of how your students are using this toolbar. So at the top, you can see we have two tabs. I have Features and I have Analytics. Under Features, this is actually really handy and something that I've had a lot of teachers asking about. Being able to restrict what your students are able to do and what tools they're able to use at any specific time. So what you can see here is I can click on my classes and I can choose which Google class that I want to look at. And I only have a sample student in this classroom. But what I can do is if I choose one student, or I could technically choose an entire classroom, in this window now you can see that I can actually turn off and on features that my students have access to. So let's say you're doing a vocabulary test and you don't want your students to have access to the dictionary. What you do is you'd go in here, you'd choose any or all of your students in that class, and you would just turn off the certain features you don't want them to have access to. So for example, you might want to turn off the web search for some of them, translation if this is a French class. So you have this kind of control, and then when you're ready, you would hit set. And you can decide whether it's only for 1 hour. That way you don't forget after the test to turn this stuff back on. But you can set it until you change it back. So if you have students who are abusing a certain tool or you just don't think they need it, you can turn it off for good until you decide otherwise. But I really like that they've added this timer in. So that way, if you're anything like me, you don't forget for your students. Once you hit save, it says that it's going to take a little bit of time. And then you're all set to go. So I just find that a really handy tool that they've added in, and I'm very happy for that. The other side that you're going to see is analytics. So same thing, you can choose which class you want to look at. So under my technology class, I only have my one student. And then you can decide for how long you want to see how much your students have been using their toolbar. So I can say last 30 days, I could set a custom range, whatever it is, and then I'll hit get data. Now, again, for this account, I don't actually have any data for it. This is a sample account that I never use. But this is what it gives you. It'll show you events by day and show you a spike of how often the toolbar is being used. And down here, it's going to show you the actual tools that are being used. So I'm going to bring up a censored version of one that I have for us. So this is for looking at one particular student in a geography class. So what it shows you is that each day, how much they're using the Read and Write toolbar as a whole. And then down below, I'm sorry that it's so blurry, but you can see this pie chart of which tools are being used. So this student is using the speech to text, text to speech. So they're having their text read back to them very frequently, but they're really not using the speech input, which is something that with this particular student we've been working on. So I can go in and see, after I've had a discussion with them and after we've talked about some strategies, I can actually track to see what they're using. So if a student comes back and they've handed you a test that they say they dictated, and you can actually go back and see for sure whether that's true. And then you can look at an entire class as well. So if I switch to my next page here we go. So this is, I could see total events for my entire class. So this is all of my students selected. Tells me how many events each student is using in 30 days. And again, you can see that the speech is very heavy in my school. So my students are using a lot of this, the text-to-speech. But then you can really then go through and start looking at what other tools are being used and are underused. So this really gives the teacher a lot more understanding of what your students are doing with this assistive technology, and you can start building lessons around it. Maybe they don't understand how to use the highlighters. Maybe they're not really sure how collect highlights works. And that's where you can start building those into your lessons and actually making a little bit more out of it. So that's really all there is to talk about today for the Read and Write DataDesk. So again, I'm going to leave a link in the comments or in the description here. But if you go to datadesk.texthelp.com, as long as you have a Read and Write subscription, this will give you access to this tool. And I'm going to leave this as a favorite here. This is something I'm going to be using pretty frequently with my students, and I recommend you do the same thing. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to send them to me, sam@samgoving.com. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Once I hit 100, I can finally get that fancy URL I'm looking for. And other than that, go Leafs go. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great Easter weekend. Cheers.